So in terms of the background or rationale for the project, urban natural open space systems provide important benefits in terms of ecosystem services and ecological infrastructure, but yet the relationship between biodiversity, ecosystem services, and spatial planning is not well understood, and as a consequence, ecosystem services are often not considered and included or incorporated into urban planning and management. And this is evident by the number of natural areas that are being rapidly transformed, particularly by the unprecedented urbanization in the global south, impacting adversely on those ecosystem services and particularly benefiting many of the urban poor that depend directly on the ecosystem services. So with this context of pressures facing many urban natural open space systems in Africa, the study aimed to ascertain to what extent and why ecosystem services, particularly provided by natural open spaces, are incorporated into urban planning and management. So within that broad framework, what we aim to do, focusing on a local municipality, which was the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality, we aim to identify local government priorities for their natural open space system, to develop an understanding of if and how the ecosystem services are considered and what are the reasons that they consider, why they consider them, and also to ascertain the extent of proactive planning undertaken regarding regulating and other ecosystem services. So just in terms of the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality, from a biodiversity point of view, it's really unique in terms of based on the fact that 5 biomes converge within the city. It's also the convergence of 2 global biodiversity hotspots. So from a biodiversity point of view, it's really unique. And as a result of this uniqueness, a metropolitan open space system, which is referred to as the NMOS, was prepared in 2009 based on the systematic conservation planning process, which identified priority conservation sites, but considering those sites in conjunction with other land use pressures within the municipality. That MOS plan has been incorporated into municipal plans, so the IDP and the Municipality Spatial Development Framework. But the reality of the MOS on the ground is quite different. The MOS plan has not been updated since 2009. A lot of the MOS sites, and most of them are not legally protected. They're just part of the Metropolitan Open Space System. Some are privately owned, some are owned by the municipality. There's a lot of land invasion, there's a lot of encroachment, there's a lot of grazing, there's illegal and illegal developments, as well as some legal developments that have been permitted in the open space. From the socio-economic and demographic point of view, in the municipality situated in what's said to be one of the poorest provinces in South Africa, and that's also reflected in the municipality itself. At least 30% of the households that are dependent on the municipality for assistance, so in terms of the indigent subsidy, there's high levels of socio-economic dysfunctionality and lots of pressures on vacant land, and high levels of political and institutional instability, which unfortunately is often in the media. And all this, of course, impacts on the municipality's ability to provide and maintain services and to move beyond a welfare state, and this includes being able to maintain those ecosystem services that are provided by the open space system. So the methodology that we followed was essentially 2-phase. We did qualitative interviews with key senior officials within the municipality, and we also analyzed municipal decision support tools and documents that have an impact or influence how planning decisions are made. Any inferences to ecosystem services, whether direct or indirect, were categorized according to the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment categorization. And then just in terms of the content analysis, the majority of these municipal documents did not actually refer to ecosystem services or biodiversity, not even the environmental related documents, so much did they mention ecosystem services. So we used a range of search words to identify any inferences to ecosystem services. Then in terms of the interviews, again, a lot of officials are not familiar with the term ecosystem services and biodiversity. So questions were framed really broadly around the environment, trying to ascertain to what extent officials and then with officials and then also the departments that they work in, to what extent they actually consider the environment. And that, of course, has a lot of, the way they value the environment has a lot of implications in terms of how the environment and nature is actually incorporated into their planning decisions and their management. In terms of the finding, the interrelated findings from both the interviews and the municipal decision support documents were categorized into 4 main interdependent themes, so really overlapping, very, very difficult to actually categorize them independently. But the 4 interdependent themes were planning for ecosystem services, complex institutional dynamics, the perceived value of the natural open space system, and the perception of the sustainable development goals. And within each of these themes, we identified opportunities and challenges, and then also strategies. So in terms of the strategies, were there opportunities that could be optimized, and if possible, how could we address the challenges that were identified? So the next slide unpacks, I'm not going to go through it in detail, but it unpacks the interrelated themes into a lot more detail. I'll just pick out 1 or 2 just to illustrate as an example. So for example, in terms of the theme planning for ecosystem services, the regulatory function was categorized and that was prioritized rather, and that's much easier, I think, for municipality to understand because of the flooding problems and the settling in floodplains. But in terms of challenges, there is really a limited understanding of the diverse ecosystem services that the MOS provides. So as an example of potential strategies, the metro has quite an extensive coastline, and those socio-economic upliftment opportunities associated with the coastline could also be extended to include the MOS. Another example of a strategy is the Built Environment Performance Plan, which each metropolitan municipality in South Africa has to prepare. If that plan could advance the importance of ecological infrastructure, that means the municipality would have to budget for that, and that would increase the possibility of the open space being maintained better. Another example, just in terms of the SDGs were typically not embraced and considered at all by 90% of the officials and the departments within the municipality. So just to sum up some of the major findings, planning for and management of ecosystem services, particularly provided by the natural open space system, is influenced largely by municipal service delivery challenges, equity challenges and poverty, as well as complex institutional constraints. There's really little focus on the socio-economic opportunities and other benefits that the metropolitan open space system can provide. Just in terms of complex institutional dynamics, departments, there's a lot of political interference in what departments are responsible for, so there's lots of conflicting departmental and political agendas. And I think the institutional dynamics are probably best summed up in this quote by one of the officials. Officials are trying to be functional in a dysfunctional environment, and that's really what is happening in the metro. In terms of values, perception, and knowledge, those, of course, influence the management of ecosystem service and whether or not they're included into municipal planning. And there's a pretty narrow understanding or limited knowledge of the value of the natural open space system. The focus is essentially on compliance, and particularly in terms of whether or not we need to do an EIA, and once the EIA has been done, that's basically it. So the MOS is only considered in terms of whether it impacts on the EIA requirements. And another quote there to indicate the kind of dichotomy, is it MOS or is it houses? And that particular official that said that was saying these are also what the politicians ask. So just to sum up on some of the policy and management implications identified, the importance of prioritizing the regulatory functions provided by the open space system, and this of course is pivotal in the urban resilience agenda, but we need to make sure we place emphasis on equity and justice. The need to frame ecosystem services according to municipal priorities and also community goals and needs, and then they're more likely to be incorporated into urban planning and management. Building on the appreciation of nature that there is, in building on that more and making sure that we enhance socioeconomic upliftment. the importance of collaborative processes, so knowledge co-production, collaborative management of the natural open space system, because it's known that the municipality can't do it on its own. And then the importance of involving government officials in preparing and updating their policies, as opposed to consultants doing the work and officials not actually taking ownership of that. And then I'd just like to acknowledge all our interviewees and for their openness and time, and that's all. Thanks.